welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, where all things football are injected right to your veins, with your hosts, Matt Donnelly, Calvin Shoemake, and Jeff Mueller.
What is up? Dynasty Vipers Vipercast Team Spotlight Series. This is 29 of 30. We're almost there. And we've done an awesome job of setting up the teams. And we've had some amazing guests that have helped us do that. Today is no exception. We're going to have some smart guys talk about the Vikings today. This is going to be a hard one for me as a Saints fan. A couple of heartbreaking ends to seasons for me. But we're going to get through it. Put our fandom aside and let these guys talk about their team. So here's what we're doing. As we get into this time of year, as I say every show, we start to think about the rookies, and that's good. We want to break them down. We want to understand like how good they are. But we need to understand the teams that they're going to find themselves in. Free agency is going to happen. Trades are going to happen. And so we're going to break that down with this awesome panel of guests. We'll go around the room, let them introduce themselves. Sam, let's start with you. Tell us what you're doing, what you're working on this offseason, where we can find you.
Yeah, so I think you can mostly just find me on myself spending way too much time on Twitter at Sam Darrell BFF. And I'm kind of writing some articles here and there. I'm not writing a ton right now, but if you want to read anything I've written before or anything I will write, you can find that over at Breakout Finder. And then most notably, I'm spending most of my time working on a podcast right now with my guy at Kane Robb and at Tanner Larson 11. We're doing it's called the Fpo Podcast, and we are kind of branding it as the FPO game show. It's just something that we thought, the fantasy community kind of needed some, fun, lighthearted stuff that we can kind of get to know people here and there. And it's been going super well. We've had people on like Steffi Smalls and Jordan Richards. So that's kind of what I'm spending most of my time right now. And yeah, go check that out.
Very cool. Make sure to check that out. Bob is coming in with already some throwing some heat against the Vikings here. But Tyler, I know you're out. Sam mentioned being on Twitter a lot. I certainly see you there. You got a lot of things going on yourself. Where can we find you, and what are you working on this offseason?
Yeah, you can always find my voice on Dynasty Happy Hour, my rankings on Dynasty Nerds, and just enjoying it. I mean, it's the first season I don't have to worry about a website, so we're kind of getting back to where we started, our roots, and we're just enjoying it now. Before, the website can be very, very, like, it's a bigger burden than people think, especially when you're the one controlling it. And I think this season I'm more relaxed and just more ready to go. I've dug deeper into tape than I have in the past 3 years, so I'm ready for this season.
That is awesome to hear. And joining us from across the pond, Kurt. Awesome to have you, man. Thanks for joining the show. Where can we find you, and what are you working on?
Good, man. I'm at Springboks FFC on Twitter. I've only published one article. The Vipers put it up for me a couple of weeks ago, so I'm just very new into actually contributing to the community. So I'm excited about that. What lies ahead. But yeah, no, it's been good. There's not many of us that play fantasy football in South Africa. Or in all of Africa. So, yeah, it's good to be part of it.
Yeah, really cool to see you kind of jumping in there and leading the way. I'm going to go toss it right back to you because I'm excited to learn about all of you guys and how you became Vikings fan and a little bit of your history with the team. Kurt, I imagine it's not common that you bump into very many Vikings fan where you're from.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. You be at a mall and see a guy in a Vikings jersey and run after him and say, "Hey, man, where'd you get that?" And they're like, "I don't know, Goodwill, something. I don't know where it's from." And anyways, yeah, I was born in Minnesota in '62, so I've been a Vikings fan for a long time. Yeah.
Very cool. Tyler, how about you? What's your history with the Vikings like? You had a cool story before the show.
In '98, I wasn't a huge football fan. I was pretty young. And I think I was about 12. Yeah, I was about 12. And in '98, we had a party at my aunt's house. My dad was like, "You can't have any more cookies. You can't have any more sweets. You've had enough." And it was towards the end of the game. And I said, "You know what, Dad? I'm going to root for the other team." And then everybody knows up here in Minnesota what happened during that game. We had the perfect team, the best offense in history. And let's just say it did not end well for somebody who was perfect in the season. It was a missed kick. I regret doing that to my dad because I love the guy, but I mean, he had it coming. If he would have just given me a cookie, maybe the Vikings would have won. Maybe that aura. Yeah, there's a chance. Maybe that's why the kick was missed. But yeah, and that's how I became a Falcons fan. I stuck with the Falcons. I throughout high school, like 6th, 7th grade, I went to the Buccaneers for a little bit, the Panthers, but the Falcons were always there. And I think it's because my mom just found starter jackets for the other teams is why I became a fan of them. but yeah, Vikings and Falcons have been my two kind of stable teams. And I mean, everybody's got to have a backup team, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're allowed 3 teams. You're allowed 2 really passionate ones. And then you have a backup in case, they go full Houston Texans.
That's right.
Well, it's always the Vikings and whoever's playing the Packers, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. If there's one thing that all people in Minnesota or have kind of a close connection with the Vikings, they all hate the Packers. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter. Like if I see somebody in Minnesota that's a Packers fan, I kind of just disown them.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough because I don't hate the Packers. I definitely don't like them, but my co-host and one of my really good friends is a Packers fan. And I also went to college in Wisconsin. So they've kind of, they've dampened my hate for the Packers for sure over the past couple of years. But
Sam, I know you're right there in Minnesota, but I mean, have you been a lifelong Viking fan there as well?
Yeah. I grew up here. My whole family was big into football for a long time, and I'm pretty young, so I'm still only 25 years old, so I haven't really gotten to experience a lot with the Vikings. But I know that on a previous podcast, I had heard that like the Vikings lead the league in most played Super Bowls without a win, and so I feel like that's usually a pretty good representation of what it's like to be a Vikings fan, just because they always kind of give you hope, but it just never really works out, and I know that I'm just going to get sad talking on this podcast about the Vikings because I'm just going to feel the same way after.
Yeah. The worst part about being in Minnesota, though, is you sit there and you go with other places like Boston. Okay, a team's struggling. You can always go to the Red Sox or something. Right. Up here in Minnesota, you don't have that luxury. Like the Timberwolves should be really good, and they're not. They're never good. They have such talent. They're never good. The Twins, they are like the Vikings of baseball. Right. They get into the playoffs, they dominate in regular season, then they can't beat the Yankees. And then you got the Minnesota Wild. Same thing. So much hope. They look good this year.
They look good this year, and that's just going to happen again.
It's going to happen again. But we always have the Minnesota Lynx. Like we had them. So I mean, we've got at least one team.
Yeah. And I think the time that I probably fell in love with football, it's kind of two different things. Fantasy football has been one of them for me. That's really piqued my interest for football just in general. But I was at the 49ers game in 2009 when Brett Favre threw that game-winning touchdown to Greg Lewis. And
beautiful.
It was just one of those moments I will never forget my whole life. So that's
I have a similar story to that. It was 2007. I'm a Falcons fan, and it was the year Vic had that whole thing happen, and Falcons bring in Joey Harrington at quarterback. Ugly mess. I went to the home opener, AP's rookie year, and he caught that pass, that little swing route. He caught that pass, bobbled it. He ran directly towards me because we had really good seats, and he was running directly towards me, and I saw that, and instantly I thought to myself, I looked around and I captured it. I said, I will never forget this moment right here. And it's insane how big that guy was and how fast he was moving.
Yeah, man.
The Vikings have had a lot of great players to root for. I mean, like you think about Adrian Peterson, you can make an argument he's one of the top running backs of all time. Randy Moss the same way. You got to see Brett Favre there for a little bit. He's certainly in that upper echelon. A lot of good things to root for there, but 2020 didn't necessarily have a ton. Now you did have Justin Jefferson to root for, and he certainly exploded on the scene, did really well.
Thank you, Eagles.
Did really well. Do what?
Yeah.
Thank you, Eagles.
Right. So yeah, it's 2020, 7-9. It started off worse. The team seemed to play better as it went along, but really the defense seemed to let them down. Kurt, what was 2020 like rooting for the Vikings?
It's horrific. It's one of those you start 1-5 and you almost start to think, why don't we just tank and get a really good player, and then we win the next 5 and you go 5-1, and you're like, we're back to 500. Like, what in the world? My favorite player is Danielle Hunter. Love Hunter, and when he didn't come to Mankato, it was a disaster. I mean, even getting Ngakoue. I mean, I can imagine what the Vikings would have been with Ngakoue on one side and Hunter on the other side. I think our whole fell apart because of the defensive line. Pierce, opting out because of COVID and what. We just, we couldn't put a rush on the quarterback. Our cornerbacks and safeties just got blitz. Blitz is not the right word, but they just threw on them all day long. And we're always on our back foot. And I think that's one of the great things about Jefferson was our defense played so bad, he had to go out and go down for the ball. And it made him look really good, but it was in part because of our defense was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, what do you think about the 2020 season?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because kind of like you said, there's a point where we played the Falcons and just got stomped on, and then we were 1-4, 1-5 at that point. And in my mind, like, I don't know, I wasn't like, of course, I was sad that it wasn't working out, this season, but like, I still think we have a pretty solid roster. Like you said, we sustained a bunch of injuries on defense that it kind of just ruined the season, and it was a COVID year, and I kind of just lost hope, and I was like, whatever, it's okay. Like, I'm okay with getting a high draft pick. And then we came back and like won a bunch of games because I'm one of those people that I've had some reservations about Kirk Cousins, but I'm all in on Kirk Cousins at this point. Like, I think he has what it takes to take us where we want to go, and that's the Super Bowl. But it really is just going to come down to whether, in my opinion, whether Rick Spielman and I'm forgetting the head coach right now. Oh, Mike Zimmer. If they can be on the same page, I think, just because I don't know, roster construction versus Mike Zimmer, what he's good at, just doesn't seem to line up right now for me. So.
Yeah, there were some moves. Gary Kubiak was in there as the OC, and now it's his son replacing him. But Tyler, what do you think about that system? I mean, a little bit of a change from Stefanski, but similar in some of the style. What do you think about the move there and what you saw on the field?
I actually thought it worked out for both teams, or both parties. Delvin Cook, Kirk Cousins. They play well in that system. The West Coast play action style, and Jefferson really helped. I remember on Dynasty Happy Hour, people were kind of wondering what was wrong with the Vikings, and I stated to Doug, and I said they need to get Jefferson on the field. They need a number 2 receiver next to Thielen. Like, Thielen is still very good at what he does, but he's not that prototypical one, the guy that can kind of stretch the field a little more. And I said they need to get Jefferson. And BC Johnson ain't it. Like, he was all right. Chad Beebe ain't it. These guys weren't it. And once they got Jefferson integrated in that offense, they started taking off and it allowed Delvin Cook more space as well. And we all saw what Delvin Cook did, the 2/3 of the season. He dominated, and that's what the offense needs to run through. I think we really figured out the offensive line at the end of the year. We have Israel Cleveland, who people had doubts on. He played pretty well towards the back half. And it's good to see the line kind of solidify themselves, because that is what is kind of in this offense. That's what needs to be the powerhouse, is that offensive line. Because if that falls apart, the whole offense falls apart, because Kirk Cousins is not the Lamar Jackson type, let's just say.
It's debatable, I guess. But Kurt, let's just flip the page over to 2021 that's a good way to transition right there with the move from Gary Kubiak to his son. He's got Clint Kubiak, who's going to be taking over now, and a lot of similarities going forward. Don't have to ask Kirk Cousins to do anything different than he was already doing. That's huge. What do you expect, like, from I guess from the top, as far as the coaching? Is just everything going to basically be the same going forward? Do you expect there to be like some subtle changes to try to take advantage of what some of the personnel could do?
I think the biggest change I see is with Rudolph being released. I think Irv Smith is going to have a bigger role to play in the offense. I think he came on towards the end of the year as well. And it's really exciting to think of what the offense would be with him out there. if he could just get 1 or 2 more targets a game, his numbers would pretty much double. So I think he's a good fantasy option going forward. And I think that wouldn't change the offense tremendously. It would pretty much be what it is. Conklin, in my mind, is a blocking tight end. So I think that would release him to do that. And I think I guess a lot of it depends on the draft too. I saw David Jeremiah said we're going to pick Smith from Alabama. If we get him as a wide receiver, that he may have to change the offense a little bit just to take advantage of him. I don't think we'll do that, but yeah, that would be significant.
Sam, that really is one of the first big moves, big splashes there from the Vikings this season. Releasing Rudolph opens up room for Herb Smith. Really hot name on Twitter right now. What's his ceiling?
Man, it's funny because I think the way that Tyler was just talking about how Justin Jefferson kind of had like a explosive impact on the offense, I really think that Irv Smith could have a similar impact. Obviously, probably not to the same extent, but like, I don't know. I love Kyle Rudolph, and he's been really good for the Vikings for a long time, and has some of the best hands I've ever seen. But typically, he hasn't been the most explosive player. So I think Irv Smith will hopefully be able to provide some of that. But I will say that I was slightly surprised by how good Tyler Conklin looked when both Rudolph and Irv Smith were out towards the end of the year. And so, like, do I think Tyler Conklin's going to take that much away from Irv Smith? No, but I do have some reservations about it. And so, like, I love Irv Smith. I think he can be, at least in fantasy wise, I think he can land in that 5 to 10 range. I'm not sure about top 5 yet, but I think he's going to be a solid option going forward, especially just in terms of football for the Vikings.
And Tyler, as Mike asked here, Irv Smith being a top 12 tight end, that's kind of a low bar at this point with tight ends. There's not a lot of, if you were ranking top 12, it gets pretty dry pretty quickly. I mean, do you think that's a fair place to put him, kind of in that 11 to 12 range, or do you think he deserves to be higher?
No, I'd say 8 to 12 for me. And it's just because of the options in the offense. They're still going to run through Delvin Cook. Jefferson's going to get his. I think Thielen will probably get a little more targets. I do think they draft a receiver in this draft. And around the second round, they need that slot receiver, the smaller guy, or maybe even a speed receiver. That's what I was thinking. The weapon, like a Will Fuller type, would fit perfect in this offense. And it's not a slight against Jefferson and his speed, but Jefferson's just a do-it-all guy. Thielen's that red zone monster. We just need that other dimension. And I mean, if you look at our depth chart, it's not great at the receiver. It's after Thielen and Jefferson, you are digging for people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I could see them going receiver early in the draft. First round, my guess is it's going to be offensive line. That's pretty much typical Vikings. They need to get the defensive line or offensive line. They want the trenches. But for Irv Smith, I'd say 8 to 12. He's going, I mean, a tight end 1 nowadays is like 50 yards on a touchdown each week. It's bad. And we've got
not even that.
Oh yeah, that's true. And we got
a couple 50 really yards a week.
Yeah, we got a couple really good tight ends in this draft too, and Pitts and Freiermuth, who I think can step in and be top tight ends right away. But other than that, yeah, I think Irv is a buy, but he's getting to the point where he's almost a sell now.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just tough to know how much volume he will actually get, even if he is starting, just because there are so many other really good players there. I don't like the term that's like there's too many mouths to feed, but like, typically the most talented player is going to command the most targets, and Irv Smith is at best 4th on that list for the Vikings.
Yeah,
so.
and it all depends on if Delvin can capitalize on those touchdowns like he did this past year.
Yep.
If he can't, Irv will be a big red zone guy. Same with Thielen. And also how our defense plays. If our defense can get healthy, and I mean, Kurt was talking about Danielle Hunter. I mean, I met that man in person, and he looked me in the eyes, and I that's the only time I've soiled myself by a stare. He is a very big, powerful, soft-spoken, but when he does speak, you are listening. And he is a man among boys. He is the dude. I think he's the top 3 defensive end, and if Vikings can get him back and pair him with somebody else, I know we got who's that defensive end that we just re-signed from the Panthers? Like
Stephen Weatherly.
Yeah.
Yes, he played really well for us when he was with us. And so getting him back, I think playing opposite side will help Hunter out as well. And getting back the D tackle from Baltimore that we signed, Pierce, he's going to be a huge difference maker for this defense, because the Vikings defense, since I can remember, has always had that defensive tackle, nose tackle anchor. Always. We had the Williams brothers, we had Joseph, and then now we had Pierce. So, I mean, that is pretty much the anchor of the defense.
Yeah. So if the defense gets better, because you guys mentioned it already, Michael Pierce coming back after he opted out, Daniel Hunter was hurt, he's going to be coming back. You sign Weatherly. There's the assumption that there's going to be some additions to the defense, and that's the side of the ball that clearly needed some upgrades there. But does that begin to impact what we can expect from the offensive skill position players from a fantasy perspective? And one of the things that really benefited this team was they got down and they, ultimately they scored a lot of touchdowns. They were really efficient through the air, 27th in passing attempts. So bottom 5, but 6th in touchdowns. I mean, that's a
Crazy.
large disparity that's Tannehill-esque right there.
Yeah.
Kurt, do you think that is what we can expect going forward? Are they going to be that efficient at having that few pass attempts and being able to produce that many fantasy points because they're scoring so many touchdowns?
Man, I hope so. I think for me, I think if our defense is playing at a much higher level, we're going to get more snaps. We're going to have more possession time, more plays run. And I think that will be the main difference. I think Shanahan, our offense.
I wish.
Yeah,
would be nice. The change in offense coordinator, I don't think is going to change our offense tremendously, but I think if our defense plays well, we can get the ball more, and that would give us more opportunities. I think it should make Cook better, if nothing else, because if we're in the game, he's gonna pound the rock.
Tyler, do the passing weapons take a little bit of a hit if they're not as efficient next season?
Jefferson's yardage might come down a little bit. That's probably the only difference I see. I mean, Zimmer for defense is a defensive back type guy. He loves the defensive backs, and he really likes Jackson from Cincinnati. He's a free agent. I would not be shocked if they go out and snag him in free agency. Now that Rudolph's gone, they do have some money to toy around with, and that could be an option for them. But yeah, I think the defense does take a step up. I don't think they're going to be extremely better, but that's not saying much from last year. You could always get better from how they were last year. I mean, our rookie corners played well, and yet our 4th round or 5th round pick, that was a corner, played better than our 1st round pick, which is absolutely absurd to me. But Zimmer will get that defense fixed. If it's not great, it's going to be good. And with those chances, they should have more turnovers, more takeaways. They still got Harrison Smith in the back, just ball hawking everything. So it could end up being short yardage. You could see more touchdowns, but I think the yardage for sure for Jefferson will probably take a hit.
Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with a lot of the things you just said. I think, I was just kind of looking at the salary cap, because I do think that I don't really know I feel like I don't know what the Vikings are going to do in free agency and the draft, just because we're pretty close to the cap right now, if not over, if I'm correct. And so I'm like,
$3 million over, last thing I saw.
Right. And that's with Kyle Rudolph cut already. And so I just wonder what kind of room we're going to be able to make to be able to go out and sign a guy like William Jackson, is it that you said, right?
Yeah.
From the Bengals. Because I do think that adding a veteran cornerback is really going to help out the defense a lot, just because we have so many young guys. And, maybe we get Mike Hughes actually healthy for a year and see what happens with that. But overall, I think the offense is going to be pretty similar. I'm with you that Justin Jefferson's yards might go down, but maybe his touchdowns go up. I mean, Adam Thielen had 14 touchdowns this year, which is pretty absurd. He was basically only scoring touchdowns. So,
yeah,
I think
Evans style.
Right. I think they might balance out a little bit in that sense. So I think it'll be pretty similar. I just don't see much changing. And if anything, it might be better. I don't know. I really like the Vikings offense. It really showed out this year. And if we can find some consistency, I don't think much will change.
Yeah, and going back to the cap situation, I do feel like there's a chance Anthony Barr could get cut. He's got a hefty cap that goes towards the Vikings, and he's just never healthy. And when he is healthy, I almost feel like he's a replaceable asset in the position he plays. He's good at what he does, but man, you could find that type of production for way cheaper. And it's just, I think that's an option we need to explore.
Yeah. So all that would ultimately mean good things based on what you're saying for one Kirk Cousins, who I think nobody really mentions him as being one of the best quarterbacks. Nobody thinks about drafting him as a top 12 quarterback, top 15 quarterback. Kurt, should they be thinking about him in that way?
No. Maybe top 15, not top 12. I don't think he's ever going to be there. He doesn't run. I don't know how you can be in the top 12 if you don't run, unless you're that goofy guy from the Cheeseheads. There are guys that can do it with their arm. I don't think Cousins is that guy. He's more RPO, but he's not going to run. So I think for Cousins to be more successful, I think we're going to have to get rid of Dozier. I think he was the weak link on the line this year. And Ezra Cleveland, I think Tyler said it earlier, he played great towards the end of the year. And so maybe they move him or something, or draft somebody. But I think if we can just firm up that line a little bit, I think that's going to be huge. And I think, I don't know. I just don't see Cousins throwing enough touchdowns, enough yardage, or running. He 12 to 15 he can do. I just picked him up in an auction to back up my first quarterback. So I think he's a great super flex. He's a great quarterback to have on the team as well. Single QB, he's a great guy to have on the bench for a couple of weeks if you need him. But I don't rate him that highly.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just tough because he needs a lot to go his way. But in terms of accuracy, he's right up there with Drew Brees. And something that Drew Brees had a lot in his career was a really good offensive line that gave him time to really just throw in tight windows and all that stuff. And so, if Kirk Cousins were able to get a really good offensive line, I think he could do it. But it's just tough because the Vikings just haven't been able to land on some, first-round draft picks on the offensive line or be able to sign anyone in free agency. And it's just tough to see them do that this year. But Tyler did say that, the offensive line was looking good at the end of last year. Well, good as in average and not horrible. So, I think he'll be in that middling range again, probably. But I'm a huge fan of Kirk, and there's nothing more I'd love to see than Kirk Cousins have just an MVP-like season. So
that would obviously mean good things for the Vikings. And I think to set that up, you've got a pretty good running back that kind of stirs the drink for the Minnesota Vikings for sure. So, Tyler, when you think about Dalvin Cook, I don't think anybody right now is thinking of him as the number 1 overall pick, but I haven't even seen him be going in the first round, except for maybe in the back end. Why are we underrating him? He's shown he can be healthy. He's shown he's one of the more talented running backs in the league. It seems like he's a little bit underrated right now.
It's because in the Dynasty community, it's an ageist type community. He's going to be around 26, so he's getting up there in age. He's got the contract, though, and when he's healthy, he's 2 years removed from the ACL that we saw. I think this will be, year 3? So I'm pretty sure it's year 3 removed from the ACL going into it. So that's in the past. That shouldn't be a worry anymore. And remember when everybody was worried about his shoulders? What shoulders are we even talking about now? He's never had an issue. He's fantastic in every aspect. He's so good. I don't even have words to explain how good he is when he's fully healthy. And even if this line is still average, he's still going to create space for himself. He's very good in the open field. I think he's going to even have more catches than he did before. I think they're going to evolve him more than that, especially if they don't draft a guy in the first round or second round at receiver. I think he's going to become that just dump off type passer, which is going to hurt Irv as well. But man, Delvin Cook, he is God, I would probably say he's right behind Christian McCaffrey for me at 2 in Dynasty, just because, I mean, you have Saquon. He's hurt. He's been hurt for a while. And when he's hurt, he's on a terrible offense. That offense can't move the ball. And I mean, when Wayne Gallman is doing things and you can't when you're on the field, like, is there something with the system that he's in that's not clicking? But man, I just think that Delvin Cook needs more respect. He is he's just an asset that I still feel like is obtainable, and he's a high-end RB1 for the next 2 to 3 years, which is the window we need to start playing in. Like Derrick Henry, hated on. He's going to get you 2 to 3 more years of solid production. Same with Delvin Cook.
Bob saying that Dalvin Cook's going to retire after next year.
Breaking news.
Oh man.
You're right. I think so many times in the Dynasty community, we get too focused on age. And I think even, there's a bunch of examples of that, but Tom Brady is an example of a guy that's like free right now. But I think I would expect him to have more QB1 weeks than Daniel Jones for the rest of their careers. I mean, I don't care what the age difference is. It's, we get a little bit too caught up in that. Dalvin Cook is a really good example. Kurt, what would the drop off be from Dalvin Cook to Alexander Mattison?
Wow, I've handcuffs Cook everywhere I have with Madison, and to be totally honest, he's let me down every year in fantasy. He got hurt. You hold him. I think was it 2 years ago? He would have started weeks 14, 15, and 16, and he got hurt.
Yeah,
and everybody got Mike Boone. Madison looks really good in games when he isn't needed.
Yep.
Like when he just spots for Cook to catch his breath. But when he's the guy, he has, in my opinion, hasn't looked that good. I would love to see him turn it up a notch and get a few more carries this year, take a little wear and tear off of Cook, and actually do a little bit more. I'd like to see him catch the ball out of the backfield and do more than I've seen him do in the last couple of years.
Sam, I'm going to roll through this. We got out here in about 8 or 9 minutes. But when we think about the draft, I mean, do you think there's any chance that they start thinking about the age of Dalvin Cook and trying to bring somebody in the later rounds?
No, I don't think so. The thing is, you just signed Dalvin Cook last year. Madison, I think he still has one more year on his rookie contract, and we still have Mike Boone as a decent third string back right now. I'm like, I would be fine with just signing Mike Boone to a small contract for like 2 or 3 years just to kind of be the backup for Dalvin Cook. So I don't think we see much of drafting skill position players in the draft this year. I know that Tyler was saying that we might draft a wide receiver. I could see it. I think also I think it might be smart to draft a decent free agent, maybe someone like Curtis Samuel or something like that, where we were talking about that speed guy, or someone even cheaper than that, just because I think that consistency would be really nice. But I just don't see us drafting a running back for a little while, at least.
Tyler, you said you've been watching a lot of film, which is really cool. So you've got a good idea of these rookies. Here's just an idea that I had here. So let's say second round, there's a guy who looked like a light version of Percy Harvin that wore the same uniform last year. Could you see Kadarius Toney being an option for the Vikings?
Yeah, but I'm honestly just skeptical of Toney. I'd rather have an Elijah Moore.
Yep.
Give me Elijah Moore, who is that fantastic route runner. That's what we need. We need somebody to sit in zone, sit in space. So if Kirk can't find Jefferson, you can't find Thielen, you got the safety blanket just sitting there. And even if he's covered, you got Delvin Cook on the outside. Like, if we just get that slot receiver or a receiver that can kind of move around, like, hey, say Bateman falls in to the second round,
that would be amazing.
That would be fantastic. We would have a Dallas-like receiving core. And going back to the running backs, I like Alexander Mattison. If you like Chris Carson, you're going to love Madison. They're the same player. Always hurt because of their running style. They're crazy. And then you know what? If you like Chris Ivory, you're going to love Mike Boone because they're the exact same person. I have never seen them in the same room. I swear they're the same person. Mike Boone is fun to watch, and he's so underrated.
Yep.
Like anybody who's a Minnesota Vikings fan will like bow to Mike Boone because he is so fun to watch, and he's just such a good back. He's like Gus Edwards, like so underrated, so disrespected, but man, he could probably start for a team.
Well, and I've been a part of the group that's like, kind of wish we didn't sign Delvin Cook, even though Delvin Cook is literally one of the best backs in the league. It just seemed like we were kind of set up to have 2021 be the year where it's like Dalvin Cook moves on. Maybe we draft a running back this year, but we have Alexander Madison and Mike Boone to carry the load, and we can spend money other places that kind of seem more important. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, Alexander Madison or Mike Boone paired with a Kenneth Gainwell, a receiving back would have been nice. But Cook is a difference maker because when he's on the field, you don't know what he's going to do. Yeah. And in a split second, he's behind you. That's the best part about Delvin Cook, his acceleration. He could have a hole in the offensive line that's 2 inches wide, and he's sliding through it like a cat through a door, and he's gone. That's the best part. Like the Packers game, I was very skeptical of how he's going to do against the Packers, but you know what? He brought out his inner AP because AP always destroyed the Packers, and that was the best part about him. And Dalvin Cook killed him with 4 touchdowns, over 200 all-purpose yards. It was a sight to see.
Let's talk about the free agency. And Kurt, I want to start with you here. The most exciting skill position player I could find that the Vikings were linked to was Keelan Cole. So do you have another name in mind, or is that a guy that you kind of hope they bring in?
Exactly what I was just going to say. I like our running back core. I would love to bring in Keelan Cole. That would be what if we pick up one guy in free agency on offense. That's who I'd be for. Absolutely.
Keelan Cole, he mostly played slot for the Jacksonville Jaguars, right?
He's kind of all over.
Sure.
Yeah. He's actually. People laugh, but I agree with Kirk. Like, that's a low ball signing.
Right.
That could really work for this team. Like BC Johnson, everybody thought was going to be this route runner and stuff. He didn't really work. Keelan Cole's kind of what we wanted BC Johnson to be as our third receiver. That kind of blows my mind. I didn't think of that.
Right.
Well, there's a connection with like the Jacksonville. I think it was the wide receiver coach that you guys just brought in.
Keenan McCardell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I hate to say that you think about who our third wide receiver's been. We had Wright a couple of years ago. We had Sharp. I wouldn't be surprised if we got Humphreys. We just seem to get that guy that's a wide receiver 5. But
yeah,
I'm good about my team. I would love for them to get Cole. Yeah,
I have an irrational love for Curtis Samuel, so I'm just like,
yeah.
The issue with him though is you're paying $12 million a year for that guy.
Yeah.
And as much as a difference maker he'd make, because you could do end arounds with him, you could do a lot of things to really make this offense open up. Yeah, if we're gonna do that, like I said, Elijah Moore, even Tony in that specific role would be a good and Amari Rodgers from Clemson in the 3rd round to fill that role, that definitely. Smaller guy that can really, really open up the offense. I do think they're gonna surprise people with how early they take a wide receiver, just because I think personally, I tried chatting with Arif Asan up here, who does fantastic work for the Vikings, and I've personally met him, and his mind is insane. By the way, Arif, if you listen to this, Carson Wentz is a good quarterback, and I'm sticking with it. He hates Wentz, but I'm out. I believe because he looks like me, but anywho, I think that I asked him, I said, is there any off-season plans that you've heard? And he said, he pretty much said, he's like, it's been really quiet. And I think it's just because people kind of scrutinize Spielman with his moves. He's always under the radar. And I think he's a really good, he's really good GM. I think he gets hated on way too much, and he's drafted well. Treadwell, I've met that dude in person. It was not talent. It was personality. He is one of the worst people I've ever interviewed. It was god awful. And it's just like he's been with it so long and we haven't been winning, but injuries come in the factor. It's just, I think they're going to make the right move. I do think they realize that the receiver position is a gigantic need. And and once, like, if Thielen or Jefferson go down, we're screwed. That's it. And I think like a guy like Will Fuller with his suspension, maybe he's a little cheaper than what he would have been if he wouldn't have been suspended. Or mean, what if they do pay up for Curtis Samuel? I mean, there's
Right.
tons of options they have. It's a very wide open wide receiver market. Hey, if Juju gets 12 mil, Curtis Samuel could fall off a little bit and he could be cheaper.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's all about the market and how it plays out and what they do with the cap. But they have a lot of options. And Spielman is known for trading back. So who knows? Maybe we trade back in the first and draft a receiver like a Rondell Moore.
That would be fun.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good preview. I know a couple of you guys got a heart out here, so that's a good preview. That's the Vikings have a lot of moves that they can make, some things that they can do. I think it's it looks like based on how they ended the last season, they should have a better year next year. Sam, one last time, just tell everybody where they can find you and how we can support you during the off season.
Yeah, man. I think right now, just give me a follow on Twitter, Sam Darrell BFF, and then I'm just saying, check out the FPO podcast. It's been an absolute blast, and we have some big plans for it, and we're it's a good time. So just check it out and let me know how it goes.
Very cool. Tyler, how about you?
Yeah, you can find me at DHH_Tyler. And honestly, I haven't interacted with Sam. I've interacted some with Kirk, and I haven't really interacted with Sam. And Minnesota is a honeypot full of fantasy analysts, and I love it. It's like representing home. I love seeing all the people who represent Minnesota in the industry, and it starts with Paul Charchian, Scott Fish,
right,
and those guys at Fanball, and it's awesome to see, and it's still good to meet people from Minnesota that are in the industry.
Kurt, how about you?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, Springboks FFC. I'm going to try to put out some more articles for the Vipers. So we'll see how that goes.
Who are they? Are they new? No.
New, yeah.
Really
Check them out. Follow me at Calvin and Hobby. Follow the Dynasty Vipers at Dynasty Vipers. Matt Donnelly at Matt Donnelly FF. And while you're there, go subscribe to the YouTube channel, because you can also go find a really great interview with Paul Charchian from just last week, which was awesome, who Tyler just mentioned. Paul was a fantastic guest. And actually, in the middle of that, Mike Wright, FF Hitman, jumped in, was just watching on YouTube and jumped in on the stream, and they interacted for a little bit and talked about Dungeons and Dragons. So it was really cool. Two of my favorite people I've ever met. Paul, you would think that when you meet him, you're going to chat football. I legit chatted for 30 minutes with him about video games. Yeah. Like, he is a fanatic with video games. You want to talk to him about any new video game coming out, he's the man to talk to, and go hit up on Twitter. And Mike is just awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. We're interviewing Mike in a couple of weeks, and we got Sigmund Bloom this Friday. So make sure you are checking us out. So excited for these guys, for Matt, for the Dynasty Vipers. We appreciate it. And